So what does the tech world actually look like in 2026? We're diving into a deep analysis from DBS Bank. And guess what? The story is still all about artificial intelligence. But if you think you know how this all plays out, well, you might be in for a surprise. The plot is about to get a whole lot more interesting. So what does the near future really hold for us? If 2025 was the year AI kind of cemented its place at the center of the universe, what's next? Are we just talking about more of the same?
Well, the short answer is a big no. According to this analysis, 2026 is an evolution of the AI boom. The story definitely continues, but it's not a simple repeat. We're seeing brand new dynamics, new players storming the field, and a really fundamental shift in what the market is paying attention to.
And that shift, it starts with the playbook itself. In our first section here, we're going to look at how the rules of the AI game are literally being rewritten, creating new winners and, new losers. The way companies and investors are thinking about AI is changing, and it is changing fast. Now, what's really fascinating here is that it shows the AI gold rush is no longer a one company's show, right? For so long, the whole conversation was just NVIDIA, NVIDIA, NVIDIA. But as you can see, players like AMD and Broadcom have seriously surged, proving that the whole ecosystem of winners is expanding. And that's a trend that's only set to accelerate. And the financial stakes involved? They are just staggering. I mean, get a load of these numbers. NVIDIA is targeting a combined $500 billion for 2025 and 2026. AMD, they're aiming for 60% year-over-year growth in their data center business. And Broadcom has a $73 billion AI backlog to work through. These aren't just ambitious goals, these are world-changing kinds of numbers. And that brings us to the crucial point. The whole conversation is shifting. For the past couple of years, everyone was asking, is AI a bubble? Is it a bubble? But now, the question has become, okay, can these massive industry leaders actually deliver on their monumental promises? The biggest risk isn't speculation anymore. It's all about execution. This chart just illustrates perfectly why those stakes are so high. The red bars you see represent the revenue growth of companies involved in AI, while the black bars are their non-AI peers. I mean, look at that gap. It is enormous. It's not just a sector anymore. AI is basically creating its own high-speed economy, and it's leaving everyone else in the dust.
So what's actually driving this high-speed economy? To really get a grip on the future, you have to understand the hardware that's powering it all. So let's go under the hood and take a look inside the semiconductor boom.
Okay, first, a quick primer on how a chip even gets made. You can kind of think of it like baking a cake. The front-end part is where all the tiny little circuits are created on the silicon wafer. That's like, baking the actual cake. Then you have the back end, which is where those chips get cut up, packaged, and tested. That's the decorating, the slicing, and putting it in a box. So why does that little distinction matter so much? Because this is where the smart money is heading. This chart shows that while front-end growth is still solid, it's the back end, those red bars, that's projected to outperform. You see, as chips get more and more complex, that packaging step becomes absolutely critical, and that's where a ton of new value is being created.
And this is tied to another huge idea, the memory supercycle. In the past, the memory chip market was just this crazy roller coaster of booms and busts. But AI models need to process insane amounts of data instantly, and that requires a special kind of ultra-fast memory called HBM. This bottomless demand is creating a huge structural shift toward a longer, much more stable period of growth. It really seems like this time, it actually is different.
Okay, I know, that's a lot of deep tech. But how does all this stuff affect the things we actually hold in our hands every single day? Well, that brings us to our next section, Your Gadgets Get Smarter. Let's talk about foldable phones. For years, they've been this niche thing, right? Making up only 1 or 2% of the market, mostly because of high prices and worries about durability. But the big catalyst, the game changer, is on the horizon. Apple is expected to launch a foldable iPhone in September 2026, and that single event is expected to finally trigger mainstream adoption. Projections show foldables could grab around 7% of the entire market by 2028. And what about this number? Over 50%. What is that? Well, according to Gartner, that is the projected market share for AI PCs by 2026. This isn't just about a new feature, folks. This is a fundamental reinvention of the personal computer, where AI capabilities on your device become the new standard, not the exception. Now, this whole revolution isn't just happening in Silicon Valley. Let's zoom out to the global stage for a second and look at a really significant geographical shift: Asia's growing tech power.
This chart tells such a powerful story about who actually makes the world's chips. Foundry capacity is just a fancy term for chip manufacturing power, and as you can see, Taiwan is still the dominant leader. But just look at China, shown here in light pink, now commanding over 27%. That is a massive and rapidly growing force in the global supply chain.
And you know who's taking notice? Investors. This chart tracks the performance of a U.S. semiconductor index, that's the black line, against an Asian tech index, in red. For years, the U.S. index was way ahead. But look at how that gap has been narrowing. It's a huge signal that the tech boom is truly going global, with Asian companies really closing in on their U.S. counterparts.
All right, so we've seen the new players, the new hardware, the smarter gadgets, and the shifting geography. What does it all mean when you put it together? Let's land this thing and talk about the key takeaways from this 2026 outlook.
It really boils down to 4 main trends. First up, the AI story is evolving from a single hero into a whole ensemble cast, and the focus is shifting to execution. Second, the semiconductor upcycle looks like it's going to be longer and more stable, driven by that memory supercycle and a new focus on back-end packaging. Third, our everyday gadgets are getting a major intelligence boost, with AI PCs and foldables finally hitting the mainstream. And fourth, Asia is shifting from just being a participant to being a real leader in the global tech supply chain.
And that brings us to one final, really thought-provoking question. Everything we've just seen points to a more durable, longer, and more stable tech cycle. But in an era where AI is accelerating change at an exponential rate, is the very concept of stability even possible anymore? That's the big question for 2026 and beyond. Thanks for digging into this with me.